Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah share. We are holding Mishnah Berurah Chelik Beis, and we will, Emir Tzashem, today complete Daf Nun Hey Amud Aleph and do at least a slice of Nun Hey Amud Beis. You know already that I'm very overly optimistic, but I would hope to do quite a bit of Nun Hey Amud Beis. Today's learning should be a schus for everybody in harm's way in Eretz Yisrael. Everybody, the Rebbeinu Shalom should protect everyone. Shehem. Also, the learning should be a schus for Shalema for Meir ben Chayes Sarah, who is in need of Rachamei Shamayim. So we pick up today. We continue to learn Hilchos Netillas Yadayim. We pick up on Nun Hey Amud Aleph, Siman Kuf Samach Sif Yud Dalid. That would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines down on Nun Hey Amud Aleph. Says the Mechaber, we've been speaking until now about the amount of water that you need to do Netillas Yadayim. We said you need a revi'is. We had this very interesting and complex machlokes rishonim. What precisely does it mean that you need a revi'is? According to one shita, you need the revi'is of mayim to actually land on the hands. According to Shitas Rashi, you do not need the revi'is to actually land on the hands, but everybody agrees that you need to begin with a kli hamachzik revi'is, a keli that could contain a revi'is of mayim, and that does in fact contain a revi'is of mayim, so that you're beginning with a volume of water that has the kayach of a mikveh. It's a volume of water that could bring about tahara, and a revi'is mayim is already an amount of water where we have a halachic precedent that we could view that volume of water as a mikveh in the context of Hilchos Tfilas Kelim. Now, says the Mechaber Sif Yudalid, Tzarech sheyehei revi'is mechunus b'makom echad. The revi'is of mayim that you're using for the Netillas Yadayim has to be contained in one container. She'im natal mishminis, were you to wash the Netillas Yadayim with an eighth of a revi'is, right? A revi'is, well, not an eighth of a revi'is, I'm sorry, an eighth of a halug. A revi'is is a quarter, so a revi'is is a quarter of a halug, a revi'is halug. Were you to wash the Netillas Yadayim with an eighth of a halug, a shminis is an eighth, so half of a revi'is, the chazar v'notal mishminis, and then you were to wash again with another eighth of a halug, yadav temeos kishahayu, your hands would be just as tamei as they were when you began the Netillas Yadayim. So this is very simple to understand. When we say that you need a revi'is for Netillas Yadayim, you need to have a keli that could hold at least a revi'is, and you have to have an entire revi'is inside the keli. It's not that you have to wash with a revi'is of mayim. So you could take a cup, put in a shminis halug, put in an eighth of a lug of mayim, pour it on your hands, then take another eighth of a lug and pour that on your hands and say, okay, I washed with a revi'is. No, you need to begin with a keli that can be machzik a revi'is, and there has to be a revi'is of mayim. And it would seem that the reason for this is, again, like we've noted previously, and that is that we need the Netillas Yadayim to be performed with a volume of water that could be considered a mikveh, a volume of water that could bring about tahara. So we need to begin with a full revi'is. If you wash with a shminis, you never had the volume of water that could bring about tahara. It's very nice that eventually you used a revi'is halug, but you never had a body of water that's capable of bringing about tahara, and therefore it does not work. Says the Mishnah Berurah, nice cut and pay aleph. She'em natal mishminis, were you to wash the Netillas Yadayim with an eighth of a halug, va'afilu natal shnei hashminis al yadav b'kiluach echad loy mahani. Says the Mishnah Berurah, even if you would take two shminisin, so you would take one cup that holds a shminis halug, another cup that holds a shminis halug, give them both to Levi, right, or Shimon. Give both cups to Shimon and stick out your hands and ask Shimon to pour both cups over your hands. So guess what? He's gonna pour a full revi'is over your hands. but it was not a revi'is together. It was a shminis in this cup and a shminis in that cup. So again, you never had a body of water that was capable of bringing about tahara, and therefore this would not work. Loi mahani. Because we need that the revi'is should be contained together in one place for Netillas Yadayim purposes. Sif tes vav, says the Mechaber. Revi'is sha'amru, this revi'is that we're saying you need for Netillas Yadayim, you require a revi'is bein liyadav shel gadol, whether you're dealing with somebody with large hands. Gadol over here does not mean an adult. It means large hands, size. Revi'is sha'amru, when we say that you need a revi'is, that's true bein liyadav shel gadol, whether it's the hands of a large person, so the hands are big, bein liyadav shel katan, or we're talking about the hands of a small person, so his hands are small. Either way, the Chachamim said loy plug. We don't differentiate. The Chachamim made a shear. The shear is a revi'is. Says the Mishnah Berurah's cotton pebeis, shal katan, pirush shal adam katan. It doesn't mean a minor child. It means a physically small person. Now we have a very interesting halacha over here. Let's go back to the Mechaber. So we're 3 lines up from the beginning of Kuf Samach Aleph, of Siman Kuf Samach Aleph, over here in Sif Tes Vav. The Mechaber now tells us a very, very interesting halacha. So we just have to give just a brief, very brief reminder of what we've learned over the last several days. That is, you need a revi'is for Netillas Yadayim. But we learned 2 different opinions, but according to both of them, a very interesting kula when it comes to this din that you need a revi'is of mayim. And that is that it's possible to wash Netillas Yadayim for 2 people with the revi'is. Now, if you wash Netillas Yadayim for 2 people with the revi'is, each one isn't washing with the revi'is, it would seem. Definitely when it comes to the water that hits the hands, one of them is going to have less mayim than a revi'is. But we said, both according to the Shitas Ramban and according to Shitas Rashi, we said 2 people could wash with 1 revi'is. And we saw, according to the Shitas Ramban, what you do is, you have 2 people, they both put out their hands, a third person comes and pours 1 revi'is over all 4 hands. We look at it as 1 act of Netillas Yadayim, and you've now successfully performed Netillas Yadayim on 2 people with 1 revi'is. We saw an even bigger kula according to Rashi, and that is that according to Rashi, we could take this a step further. If you have 2 people who want to wash Netillas Yadayim, Reuven and Shimon, they could both decide, okay, we're going to go wash Netillas Yadayim now from 1 revi'is. Reuven could take the cup with the revi'is, wash his right hand twice and then his left hand twice, and then give the cup over to Shimon, and then Shimon could wash his right hand twice and then his left hand twice. Even though they're doing it one after the other, still, Rashi says, we look at it that they both performed Netillas Yadayim with a revi'is. Since there was a revi'is in the cup at the outset of the Netillas Yadayim, so you had the body of water that you need in order to bring tahara, and they're doing it one right after the other, and the intent from the get-go was for both of them to wash Netillas Yadayim now. We look at it sort of as 1 Netillas Yadayim, all came from a revi'is, and we have a kula that 2 people could wash from 1 revi'is. Now, we did learn yesterday that 3 people cannot wash Netillas Yadayim from 1 revi'is. Not only can 3 people not wash from 1 revi'is, 3 people can't even wash Netillas Yadayim from 3/8 of a revi'is, right? You would think, let's do this proportionally. If you're telling me that 2 people could wash Netillas Yadayim from 1/4 of a lug, so that sounds like each one is using 1/8 of a lug. So if 2 people could wash Netillas Yadayim from 1/4 of a lug, you would think that for 3 people to wash Netillas Yadayim, you need 3/8 of a lug. Chazal said no. For 3 people, you already need 1/2 a lug. The Mishnah Berurah analyzed the math. The Mishnah Berurah was surprised by this, and he said, Why is it this way? The math doesn't work out. So the Mishnah Berurah explained that Chazal were worried. Once you have 3 people performing Netillas Yadayim, so let's look at it from the eyes of Rashi. Let's say you have Ruvain, Shimon, and Levi. So you want Ruvain to do 4 pours of water. 2 on his right hand, 2 on his left hand. Then Shimon is going to do 4 pours of water. That's 8 pours. Then Levi is going to do 4 pours of water. That's 12 pours of water. The Chazal said for 3 people to perform 12 pours of water from 3/8 of a lug, Chazal were worried they're not all going to be careful enough to be mitzamtzim, to be miserly, and use as little water as possible. And therefore, by the time it comes to the last person, it's very nice that mathematically he has 1/8 of a lug to wash the Netillas Yadayim with. We're afraid by the time it gets to the 3rd individual, there isn't going to be enough water left in the cup for him to do a proper Netillas Yadayim, for the water to hit every part of his hand that it needs to hit. So Chazal said, even though mathematically you would think 3 people could wash from 3/8 of a lug, no. For 3 people, you already need a half a lug. Now the Mechaber is going to say like this. Let's take a look at a very oddball case. And again, I think it's a little bit easier to understand this through the eyes of Shitas Rashi. It applies to Shitas Ramban as well, but just I think the case is a little bit easier to understand through the eyes of Shitas Rashi. So, 2 people want to wash the Netillas Yadayim from a revi'is. According to Rashi, how's that going to work? So Ruvain is going to take the cup first. He's taking a cup that's got a full revi'is in it. So he's going to do a perfectly acceptable Netillas Yadayim. Remember, according to Rashi, a revi'is of water doesn't have to contact your hands. According to Rashi, you need to start the Netillas Yadayim with a cup that has a revi'is of mayim, because you need a mikveh. You need a mikveh in the cup. So fine. So he takes the cup with the revi'is. Beautiful. He pours enough water on his hand to cover his hand. He does it once, then he does it twice, then he does once on his left hand, a second time on his left hand. By him, there's absolutely no shaila, there's no shaila, there's no kula. By the first guy, there's no kula at all. He did a perfectly acceptable Netillas Yadayim, 100% lechatchila, with no kulas, according to Shitas Rashi. He took a cup with a revi'is, and he washed, and each time he poured on his hands, he poured enough water to cover his whole hand, ara perek, and he washed twice on each hand. So he took the tumah off the hands, and then he took the tumah off the water. So mamish, you don't even need a kula over here. This is perfect. Now the second guy, Shimon, is going to come along. He's going to take the cup. He's only got, let's say, a shminas halug left in the cup. For him, we need a kula. Why do we need a kula? Because l'chayra, this is not an Netillas Yadayim. What do you mean, Shimon? You're starting off with a cup that only has a shminas halug. Where's your mikveh? The answer is that the kula is, since they intended from the get-go to do 2 Netillas Yadayims from this cup, and they did it one right after the other, so it was samuch. It's not an hour later, it's samuch. And when Ruvain started, there was a revi'is. So we look at it as kind of like a continuation of the first Netillas Yadayim. So the first Netillas Yadayim started with a revi'is. The second one, Shimon's Netillas Yadayim, is a continuation of the first one. So Shimon is employing a kula. That since it's Mishiyare Tahara, it's a continuation of the first act of Tahara, it works. Now let's change the scenario a little bit. Again, you have Ruvain and you have Shimon. But now, for some strange reason, they're going to perform the Netillas Yadayim in a very strange way. Ruvain's going to take the cup, and he's going to wash twice on his right hand. Then he's going to hand off the cup to Shimon. Shimon's going to take the cup, and Shimon's going to wash twice on his right hand. Then Shimon is going to give the cup back to Ruvain. Ruvain's going to take the cup, and he's going to wash twice on his left hand. And then he's going to give the cup to Shimon, and Shimon's going to wash twice on his left hand. Now, why did they do it this way? I don't know. Maybe there are 2 of these people that have like super organized minds, and in their mind, somehow this works better. But whatever it is, this is the crazy way that they decided to do this. Now, at face value, right? If you're stuck out in the park and you see two guys doing this, and they're going to ask you a shaila, could we do it this way? So at face value, you might look at this scenario. You might say, okay, what's the problem? You got two people washing Netillas Yadayim for one revi'is. We said two people could wash Netillas Yadayim for one revi'is. Says the mechaber, no, this does not work. Why doesn't this work, says the mechaber? The mechaber says because we don't look at this like two people washing Netillas Yadayim. We look at it at least like three people washing Netillas Yadayim. Why, says the mechaber? It would seem, I'm reading a little bit between the lines here in the mechaber, in the Mishnah Berurah, in the Mefarshim. It would seem that the problem is this. The problem is that Reuven took the cup and he washed twice on his right hand. Did he complete an act of tahara? No, he didn't. He didn't do an act of Netillas Yadayim. He did half of Netillas Yadayim. Now he hands off the cup to Shimon. Okay, Shimon takes the cup. Shimon is person number two. Shimon takes the cup. He washes twice on his right hand. Did Shimon complete an act of Netillas Yadayim? No. He also did a half of Netillas Yadayim. So at this point, two people have handled the cup. Two people have been working on Netillas Yadayim. But neither one of them has accomplished a Netillas Yadayim. Now Shimon hands the cup back to Reuven. Now, Reuven he's not the third individual because it's the same two individuals, but this is the third time the cup is being handled for Netillas Yadayim, right? Reuven handled it once to wash his right hand. Shimon handled it once to wash his right hand. Now Reuven is handling it now for a third time to wash his left hand. So you've got the cup trading hands already. It's being handled for the third time, but nobody has yet accomplished Netillas Yadayim. Says the mechaber, this doesn't reset the clock. We don't look at this now that it's two people that are washing Netillas Yadayim. Reuven is now a third person. It would seem the reason is because Netillas Yadayim hasn't happened yet. When in the normal case where Reuven washes Netillas Yadayim and then gives it to Shimon, Shimon could employ the kula of shiarei tahara. Reuven went ahead and he completed a complete Netillas Yadayim. He was mitahar his hands, and he did a perfect Netillas Yadayim because he started off with a cup that had a revi'is in it. Now, when the cup gets handed off to Shimon, we have a kula, and we say that Shimon is a continuation of the tahara. But in our case, when Reuven washed his right hand, he didn't complete tahara. When Shimon washed his right hand, he didn't complete tahara. When Reuven now washes his left hand, we're not going to employ a kula and say that this is a continuation. It's not a continuation. Tahara hasn't even happened yet, and the cup is being handled for the third time. Therefore, this is considered already like three people, and you can't do three people from a revi'is. For a revi'is, you need at least a halug. Now, I will confess that I'm scratching the surface over here, right? There's a lot of lumdus over here. That's between the lines. It's beyond the scope of what we do here. So I'm giving you kind of like the 30,000 foot overview. Let's see it inside. Now, before we see Siftes Vav inside, I just want to caution you that in the lashon of the mechaber, there's one piece of odd phraseology, and that is the mechaber is going to discuss the Rishon and the Sheni. So in my case, there's Reuven and Shimon. Reuven is the Rishon. Reuven is going to wash his right hand twice. Then he's going to give it to Shimon, who is the Sheni. He's the second person. And he is going to wash his right hand twice. Then Shimon is going to give it back to Reuven. Now, you would think that we would call Reuven the Rishon, because Reuven was the Rishon. But the mechaber is going to refer to Reuven at that point in the discussion as the Sheni. And the Chavetz Chaim in the Biur Halacha in the Mishnah Berurah just says that the reason the Mechaber is calling him the Sheni is because now he's next after Shimon. So we call him a Sheni, we call him a second. It's odd phraseology, but whether it's a typo that crept in or that's the way the Mechaber wrote it, that's the way it is. Let's continue here. Sif Tezvav says the Mechaber. So with 3 lines up from the end of the Siman, says the Mechaber. Notlu shnei b'nei Adam. 2 people set out to wash Netillas Yadayim. Ze yadayachas. First, one person washed one hand. So Reuven washed his right hand twice. V'ze yadayachas. And then Shimon went ahead and washed his right hand twice. V'achakach. And after Shimon washed his right hand twice, chazar hasheni. Now that's Reuven. Now Reuven, who was really the first person, he repeated v'notla yadei hashenis. And now he washes his second hand, his left hand twice. Says the Mechaber, Harei elu kishloisha b'nei Adam. We look at them as 3 people, not as 2. Ulefikach, and therefore, im haya bakli chatzitzah. If you had at least a half a lug in the cup, yadav tahiros. Their hands are tar, because for 3 people you need a chatzitzah. V'im lav, if you don't have a chatzitzah, if you only have a revi'is halug, ein yadai ashniya tahira. The second hand is not going to be tar. She'ein noitlin b'pachas b'chatzitzah yoser b'shnei b'nei Adam. Because more than 2 people, you need a chatzitzah at least, right? So you only have over here a revi'is halug. We're considering this to be 3 people. It does not work. Says the Mishnah Berurah. Ice cut and pay gimel. This was that strange piece of phraseology here in the Mechaber, where he calls Reuven, the first person, he's calling him the Sheni. Says the Mishnah Berurah Rishon Kai. We're going back on the first person. Kamosha pirashti b'Biur Halacha, like I spell out very clearly in the Biur Halacha Dibur HaMaschil, v'achakach chazar hasheni. V'kach mashma b'levush. Ice cut and pay dalit. Harei elu kishloisha b'nei Adam. We are going to view Reuven and Shimon now as 3 different people. Because this kula that we have that allows 2 people to wash the Netillas Yadayim from one revi'is, that only works if the first person washes a complete Netillas Yadayim and he brings tahara to his hands. Now we have a kula that allows the second person to also wash. But over here, where Reuven and Shimon each washed only one hand first, now we look at it that when Reuven poured water on his right hand, and then Shimon poured water on his right hand, the cup was already used for 2 people. Now when it goes back to Reuven, he's a third. Now when Reuven, the first person, goes to wash his second hand, chashuv ka'adam shlishi, the alma, we look at him as a new third individual. Umemela ein dai b'revi'is, and therefore it's not enough to wash from a revi'is halug. Ois kan pei hey, ein yadai, his second hand is not tar, ad sheyatal oleh me'revi'is mayim. He would have to now wash with a new revi'is. And so ends a very, very fascinating and complex Siman Kuf Samach. Now we move along to Siman Kuf Samach Aleph, which we're going to have a lot of halachas. All of these halachas are very negei l'maisa, but these are going to be some discussions that I think a lot of people struggle with in the Netillas Yadayim all the time. Says the Mechaber Sif Aleph. So, Siman Kuf Samach Aleph, Dine chatzitzah b'Netila, the halachas that govern the question of a chatzitzah. What's a chatzitzah? A chatzitzah is an interposition, something that interposes between the water and the hands, something that blocks the water from actually reaching the surface of the hand. So, dina chatzitzah b'Netila, the halachas that govern shilas involving chatzitzahs on the hands by Netillas Yadayim, ubay dalet se'ifim, and here we have 4 se'ifim. The Mechaber opens up Sif Aleph and he says, Tzarich lizaher me chatzitzah. We have to be careful that there should not be a chatzitzah. There should not be an interposition between the water and your hands when you wash the Netillas Yadayim. Says the Mishnah Berurah is cut in aleph. Li zoher. You have to take care that there shouldn't be an interposition. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Akdim lozer hakdama kitzara. I'm going to give you a short hakdama to the world of chatzitzahs. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Vahu, and that hakdama is, the le'inyan tfilas haguf. When it comes to somebody who wants to be toivel his guf, his entire body in a mikveh. So somebody's tameh, he has to go to the mikveh. So person goes to the mikveh really to remove tumah. There are halachas of chatzitzah. His body has to go into the water. If there are interpositions, they could be problematic. Says the Mishnah Berurah, V'hu del'inyan tfilas haguf. When it comes to tfilas haguf, kaimalon we paskin ditzarach lizar shelo yeh chatzitzah. That a person has to take great care that there shouldn't be any chatzitzahs. There shouldn't be any interpositions between him and the water. V'hainu, this means shelo yeh shum davar mudbak ala guf. There shouldn't be anything stuck to the body be'es hatfilah at the time when he's tovel in the mikveh. Dal yedei zeh, because if there is something stuck to the body, lo yeh oisei hamakom roi l'bias hamayim. That point on his body is not going to be coming into the water, right? Because the water is not going to make contact with that spot on his body. And if he was tovel in the mikveh and there was a chatzitzah, lo also la tefillah. The tefillah would not work. Okay, so first the Mishnah Berurah just introduces to us the concept of chatzitzah. If you go into a mikveh and you have dirt stuck on your body, so then when you go into the mikveh, the water is not penetrating, the water is not contacting the skin in that area. So the chatzitzah is problematic. Now, continues the Mishnah Berurah. Va'af de min HaTorah loy hevi chatzitzah eli im kein haya chatzitzah al roiv besar haguf. When it comes to the din of chatzitzah midaraisa, what constitutes a chatzitzah midaraisa? So midaraisa, in order for something to be a chatzitzah, it has to cover up the majority of the body. Now, the Mishnah Berurah, for whatever reason, he wrote it in this way, but really, and the Mishnah Berurah is going to say this as we move along, there are really two factors that are required for a chatzitzah to be considered a chatzitzah midaraisa. One is the chatzitzah has to cover the majority of the body. The second factor is it has to be something that the person is makpid on. It has to be something that the person does not want to be there. So, for example, if a person has mud caked on the majority of his body, and I'm not talking about somebody who went to the Yam HaMelach and he's using Yam HaMelach mud on his body for cosmetic purposes. Person got dirty, he fell into a ditch, he was doing work, and he got covered with mud. He certainly is makpid. He doesn't want that mud on his body. The truth is, even the Yam HaMelach mud, he doesn't want it on his body. He wants it on his body for however long it takes to do whatever kind of cosmetic treatment he or she is doing, and then they want it off. Nobody wants mud covering up their body. So for a chatzitzah to be a chatzitzah midaraisa, you need two factors. You need that it should cover up the majority of the body, roiv of the guf, and it has to be something that the person is makpid on. He doesn't want it to be there. So in the words of the Mishnah Berurah, v'aftim in HaTorah lo yev chatzitzah, even though midaraisa something is not considered a chatzitzah, elim kein haya chatzitzah roiv b'sar haguf. The first factor that you need is that it has to cover the majority of the body. But midrabanan, aser afilu im haya chatzitzah al miyat haguf. Midrabanan, we consider a chatzitzah to be a chatzitzah, even if it only covers part of the body, gezerah aturubai. Right? Since roiv is a chatzitzah, the Rabbanon extended it, they made a siyag, and they said, midaraisa roiv is a chatzitzah, midrabanan, a miyat is a chatzitzah. However, lo yasru chachamim eli im kein kichederech b'diradam lahakpid olav sheyishar kach. But the gezerah is not on any miyut. The gezerah is on a miyut hamakpid. It has to be a miyut, but something that you don't want to be there. Even if at the time that you're actually going to the mikveh, it happens to be that at that moment you're not makpid, it's not bothering you. But if it's the derech to be makpid, if normally you would be makpid, then that's considered something that you're makpid on. But something that people are normally not makpid on, that doesn't make a chatzitzah even midrabanan if it's only a miut. Unless it covers the majority of the guf, if something is covering the majority of the guf, then midrabanan that's a chatzitzah, even if you're not makpid. So now let me just break this down to you in a simple way. What's considered a chatzitzah midaraisa? Midaraisa, you need two factors to make a chatzitzah. Whatever is stuck on your body has to be covering roiv. If it's only covering a miut of the guf, it's not a chatzitzah. That's factor number one. Factor number two, it has to be something that it's the derech to be makpid. If normal people are makpid, that they don't want this stuff on their body, then that makes a chatzitzah. If it's something that people aren't makpid about, it doesn't make a chatzitzah. So what are the two variables that you need for a chatzitzah b'daraisa? You need roiv umakpid. You need covering the majority of the body umakpid. And you don't want the chatzitzah to be there. That's what you need for a chatzitzah daraisa. Came along the chachamim, and the chachamim extended this. How did they extend it? They extended it as follows. They said, let's take a look at the daraisa. The daraisa is made up from two variables. Roiv, majority, umakpid, and something that you're makpid on. So came along the chazal, and the chazal said, we're going to extend this in two ways. One way we're going to extend it is we're going to say, if it's a miut, if the chatzitzah is only covering part of your body, but it's a miut umakpid, it's a miut that it's something that you're makpid on, we're going to say that that's a chatzitzah b'derabanan. Why? Because it has one of the variables that you need to make a daraisa. To make a daraisa, you need two variables. You need roiv and you need makpid. By a miut umakpid, you're missing one of the variables. You don't have roiv. You only have a miut. But you have the second variable. You have makpid. So they were geyser on miut umakpid or to roiv umakpid. Since roiv umakpid is a chatzitzah daraisa, miut umakpid is a chatzitzah b'drabanan. Then they also made a gzera on roiv ve'enoi makpid. If you have a chatzitzah that's covering the majority of your body, but it's something that you're not makpid on, again, you have one of the variables that make up a chatzitzah b'daraisa. Chatzitzah b'daraisa is roiv umakpid. Roiv ve'enoi makpid is a chatzitzah b'drabanan. Because even though you don't have makpid, but you have roiv. So as long as you have one of the variables that make up a chatzitzah b'daraisa, that constitutes a chatzitzah b'drabanan. Okay, so now we understand what's a chatzitzah b'daraisa. And remember, so far we're talking about tfilas kol haguf. We're talking about somebody going to the mikveh to dunk and immerse his whole body to become tar. So we know that there's three ways you can have a chatzitzah. There's chatzitzah b'daraisa, roiv umakpid, and then there's two chatzitzahs b'drabanan. There's roiv ve'enoi makpid, or miut umakpid. Okay, what does this have to do with us? What does it have to do with Netillas Yadayim? Says the Mishnah Berurah going further. Bottom line here in the Mishnah Berurah, in Hey Yom and Aleph. Ule'inyan Netillas Yadayim, when it comes to Netillas Yadayim, gam kein af shehu min d'Rabbanan, even though Netillas Yadayim is only a din d'Rabbanan, called the tikkun Rabbanan kein daraisa tikkun. We know we have the golden rule that whenever Chazal made a takanas chachamim, they followed the route that was charted by the Torah Kedosha. So when the Chazal were masakin the din of Netillas Yadayim, they applied to it the dinim of chatzitzah. So now they look at the hands and they say, okay, we only need you to wash your hands. We're not washing your whole body. but we're going to apply the din of chatzitzah. So, okay, let's look at the hands. If you have roiv umakbid, if the majority of your hand is covered with a chatzitzah and you're makbid on it, that's a chatzitzah. If you have miut, if you only have part of your hand covered with a chatzitzah, but it's makbid, so it's miut umakbid, that's a chatzitzah midrabanan. And if most of your hand is covered and you're not makbid, well, that's roiv umakbid. That's also a chatzitzah midrabanan. So now we understand what constitutes a chatzitzah on the hands for Netillas Yadayim. So the Indian Netillas Yadayim gamkein, afshu midrabanan, even though it's only a din derabanan, called the tikkun rabbanan, kein daraisa tikkun, v'alkein, and therefore, im yesh chatzitzah al roiv hayad, if you have some kind of a chatzitzah on the majority of the hand, dahainu al roiv mekayim hanetila, most of the place that you need to wash, so most of the hand from the fingertips until the perek, until the wrist, also afilu ein derech b'nei adam lahakbid alav. That constitutes a chatzitzah even if you're not makbid, because a roiv ve'enai makbid is a chatzitzah b'derabanan. V'im ha'yarak al miut hayad, if it's only on a minority, a miut of the hand, enai aser, then it's not aser, eli im kein haderech lahakbid al zeh, unless it's a miut hamakbid. If it's a miut umakbid, that's a chatzitzah b'derabanan. But if it's a miut ve'enai makbid, if it's a miut that you don't care about it, it doesn't bother you, then l'chayra, that's not a chatzitzah. I'll see as we go along. I'll take a look in the Paiskim and in the Dirshu footnotes, etc., etc. But I would think that a band-aid on the pinky, on a paper cut on the pinky, is not a chatzitzah. We're gonna have to see what the Paiskim say makbid means. Would somebody go to a chasana with a little band-aid on his pinky? I think the answer is yes, he would. So then a band-aid on the pinky is miut ve'enai makbid. Miut ve'enai makbid is not a chatzitzah, even in the Rabbanon. So v'im ha'yarak al miut hayad, einay aser elim ken haderech lahakbid al zeh. Va'ata, and now says the Chavetz Chaim, Neva'er divrei HaShulchan Aruch. Now against this backdrop, I'll start to explain the words of the Shulchan Aruch as we go along. Mashe kosav lizar bechatzitza. This that the Mechaber opens up and he says tzarich lizaher mechatzitza. Then you have to take care to make sure that there's no chatzitza. What does that mean? Hainu sheyaser mehayadayim kaidem anetila. Before you go to wash the Netillas Yadayim, you have to look at your hands and you have to remove anything. Kol davar shedarech b'nei adam lahakbid olav la'asiroi. Anything that people would want to remove from their hands. So if you come in from doing work in the garden and you're starved and you want to eat a tuna fish sandwich, Rabbi Yisai, you can't come in from the garden, just walk over to the sink, grab the Netillas Yadayim cup and wash the Netillas Yadayim. You have to take a look at your hands. If you have mud on your hand, even if it's a miut, even if it's only a very, very small area, but that's makbid. Nobody walks around with mud on their hands. Now you'll say, well, right now when I'm doing the gardening work, I'm not makbid. No, it's going to be very clear from the Mechaber, from the Mishnah Berurah. It doesn't work that way. We're talking about what normal people are makbid on at normal times. So yes, people are makbid to keep their hands clean. So if you have a spot of mud on your hand the size of a nickel, right, that's miut umakbid. You can't wash the Netillas Yadayim. So tzarich lizar mechatzitza means before you go to wash the Netillas Yadayim, you have to look at your hands and you have to make sure you remove anything that would constitute a chatzitzah. So hainu sheyaser me'ayadayim kaidem anetila kol davar shedarech b'nei adam lahakbid olav la'asiroi v'im natal yadav achakach nimtza olav davar chaytzis. Now let's say you go ahead and you washed Netillas Yadayim, you're in the middle of eating your tuna fish sandwich, and suddenly you notice that there's a chatzitzah on your hand. Bein al miut hayad, whether it's only on a small spot on the hand, bein al roiv hayad, or even if it's on the majority of the hand. Talinan lahakel shenishava achakach. We could go lekula, and we could say it happened after the Netillas Yadayim. This goes in line with what we learned previously, that by Netillas Yadayim, since it's a din d'Rabbanan, we go lekula. Ach lechatchila, roi sheyayin kaidim netila. It is proper that somebody should look before Netillas Yadayim im ein alav davar chatzitzah to check that there shouldn't be anything on him that makes a chatzitzah. Okay, we're going to stop over here. The schus of limud HaTorah should be making against Klal Yisrael. The Rashab should send Yeshua's refuahs parnas and shidduchim to all those in need, and we should be zayichet to see the bias koil tzedek b'mehera v'yameinu. Amen. Be well.